Thank you, Kane, and it's great to be here with all of you. To the speakers from the other part of the country, welcome to Iowa. We really do welcome them. Iowans take elections very seriously, as you know, because we know that elections have consequences and are supposed to have consequences. In the last election, we worked hard to regain a majority in the United States Senate. And as you just were told, this Iowa farmer who never went to law school became chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And being the first non-lawyer to ever hold that position, I want you to know it's an honor, but a duty that I don't take lightly. And maybe it takes a few Iowa farmers' perspective to remind lawyers in Washington about the importance of faith, freedom, and the rule of law. And I know that there's one constitutional law professor from Chicago that needs to be reminded about that. Because you know, faith and freedom are core principles, and they unite us. They're the bedrock of America's founding, and historically, they were essential to the development of the rule of law even before the birth of this great nation. Someone at the White House recently suggested that we look up a word in the dictionary to understand the White House's point of view. When it comes to the role of faith in public life, I suggest those folks on the left look up two words: secularism and pluralism. America has never been a secular country. Webster defines secularism as, quote, indifference, rejection, or exclusion of religion and religious considerations, end of quote. While secularism has not been part of the history of America, many on the left believe that it should be our future. Now, some of you here may be tempted to worry that it will be our future. Attempts to marginalize people of faith grow bolder each year. Demands to exclude religious considerations from the public debate seem to grow louder as well. But I am confident that secularism will not take hold in America. This is not who we are as a people. The very first right recognized in the First Amendment to the Constitution is not freedom of speech or freedom of press. Even before those important rights, the First Amendment begins by preventing the establishment of a single religion, or, quoting the Constitution, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We are free not just to practice our religion in private, but to publicly exercise and express our faith in public life as well. The secularist point of view doesn't want to violate your freedom of religion. Whatever you believe, it's okay for you to believe it. Just keep your mouth shut. But the Constitution does not endorse secularism. Rather, it embodies something much more tolerant, open-minded, and fair. It's called pluralism. Webster defines pluralism as, quote, a state of society in which members of diverse ethnic, racial, and religious or social groups maintain an autonomous participation in and in development of their traditional culture or special interests within the confines of a common civilization. America is a pluralist society. Unlike in a secular society, our Constitution actually welcomes the influence of religion in public life. And we should give thanks, true thanks for that, because faith, freedom, and the rule of law are all interconnected. We are all familiar with the words of the Declaration of Independence, that men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. But of course, the idea that there were limits on the power of a king began long before 1776. And those limits relied on faith in a higher power, a higher authority than any earthly king. As leading English preacher of the 19th century, Charles Spurgeon observed, and I quote, "Let the Bible be open to be read by all men, and no tyrant can long rule in peace. The religion of Jesus makes men think, and to make men think is always dangerous to a despot's power." There is the beginning of freedom. That is the beginning of being ruled by laws rather than being ruled by men. The rule of law is the idea that government should be consistent, should be predictable, and should be fair. Decisions should be based on a neutral principle rather than on a personal whim or a personal bias. The whims and biases of thousands of faceless bureaucrats in Washington, or even of an elected president, are no better than those of a powerful monarch. Rules should be clear and apply to everyone equally, without lots of discretion for government officials to pursue their own agendas. Our government gets its authority from the consent of the governed. Representatives elected by the people write the laws, and the executive branch enforces them. The president needs the advice and consent of the Senate to make appointments and treaties. But that law professor from Chicago doesn't seem to understand these basic aspects of our Constitution. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee just dealt him a 19-0 bipartisan rebuke, signaling that a veto-proof majority in Congress will insist on approving any agreement with Iran. And the courts step in to help too, currently reviewing his unilateral decision to allow millions of people who entered the country illegally to remain without congressional approval. And last year, the Supreme Court unanimously struck down the so-called recess appointments that he made, even though the Senate was still in session. Now, for the rule of law to function properly, government officials must know that their discretion to play around in gray areas has limits. One of our jobs in Congress is to act on behalf of the people who elected us as a check and balance against the abuse of power. That's why holding government accountable through oversight and transparency is so important. It can accomplish a lot without even passing new laws. Allow me to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, 19-21. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. Now obviously, you all know John wasn't writing about transparency and accountability in government. Still, I can't help but think that there might be a practical lesson there about our fallen human nature. Just as we need to insist that government follows the law, we need to insist that people be allowed to follow their conscience. Without your help, I will continue to fight. With your help, I'll continue to fight for faith, freedom, and the rule of law. As you listen to the speakers who follow me today, let us all pray that we consider who can best carry forward that effort from the White House. Let me leave you with one more scripture, 1 Timothy 2:1 and 2. I urge then, first of all, that requests for prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving being made for everyone, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. God has established rulers over us here on earth, and we're told to respect them and pray for them. But in this country, we, all of us here, have the added blessing of being part of that establishment, and you're going to be involved in that over the next several months as we get a new president. So, without a doubt, the stakes are very high. I will be fighting with you and for you. Thank you very much.